Most people don't realize there's an entire generation quietly holding everything together, while rarely being talked about. We analyze boomers, debate millennials, and dissect Gen Z endlessly, but Generation X often disappears into the background. That invisibility is not accidental, and psychology explains why. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand how Generation X was shaped by absence, instability, and contradiction, and why that produced a mindset that looks detached on the surface, but is deeply resilient underneath. This isn't about praising or criticizing a generation. It's about understanding how a specific historical environment rewired millions of minds in similar ways. Generation X, born roughly between 1965 and 1980, grew up during a major social shift that few people fully account for. They were the first generation to experience mass dual-income households as the norm. For many of them, childhood involved coming home to empty houses and managing hours of solitude long before adulthood. Imagine being 8 years old, unlocking your front door alone and figuring things out without anyone checking in. No texts, no cameras, no instant reassurance. That environment quietly taught self-reliance before emotional regulation had fully developed. Psychologically, this kind of upbringing creates what researchers call a high-responsibility environment. When children are left to manage themselves, the brain adapts by becoming alert, practical, and consequence-focused. You learn early that mistakes have immediate results and that there may be no one there to soften the landing. This is one reason Gen X tends to think several steps ahead. They are not pessimistic by nature, but predictive by necessity. When you grow up learning that outcomes arrive quickly and without negotiation, your mind learns to scan for risk automatically. At the same time, Gen X watched many of the promises made to their parents quietly fall apart. Stable careers dissolved into layoffs. Marriages ended at historically high rates. Institutions that claimed certainty revealed deep cracks. This created a psychological split that still defines them today. They learn to participate in systems without fully trusting them. They work hard, but rarely assume loyalty will be returned. You might notice that Gen X often seems emotionally reserved. This isn't because they lack feeling. It's because their emotional world developed in an era that didn't invite discussion or validation. When emotions weren't acknowledged, the brain adapted by containing them internally. Over time, humor, irony, and detachment became protective tools. If you joke first, you reduce the chance of being hurt. Have you noticed how some people seem calm in situations that would overwhelm others, yet struggle to ask for help when they need it most? That paradox sits at the center of Gen X psychology. Another major influence was constant background threat. Gen X grew up during the Cold War, where nuclear anxiety was normalized. Schools practiced drills for disasters adults couldn't really explain, while insisting everything was under control. Living with that contradiction trains the brain to hold tension without resolution. You learn to function while uncertainty hums quietly in the background. This fosters emotional distance rather than emotional collapse. Gen X also developed a distinct relationship with privacy. Mistakes stayed local. Embarrassing moments faded with time instead of living forever online. Because of that, visibility came to feel dangerous rather than empowering. This is why many Gen Xers resist oversharing, even when they understand the technology perfectly well. It's not confusion, it's caution. The brain learned early that less exposure equals less risk. Their work ethic is another misunderstood trait. Gen X doesn't talk much about hustle or purpose. They simply do what needs to be done. Many of them started young, in jobs that demanded responsibility without praise. Paper routes, retail shifts, and manual tasks taught reliability before ambition. Work wasn't about identity, it was about survival. This created a deep loyalty not to companies, but to competence. Gen X trusts skills more than systems. They don't assume stability, but they do believe in being useful. Ask yourself who you want next to you during a crisis. Often, it's someone who doesn't panic, doesn't announce their efforts, and doesn't wait for instructions. That's the imprint of Gen X problem solving. Their relationship with authority is equally nuanced. They respect experience, not titles. If someone knows what they're doing, Gen X listens. If they don't, patience evaporates quickly. This skepticism was learned, not chosen. They grew up watching authority figures make visible mistakes with lasting consequences. Trust had to be earned through competence, not position. Economically, Gen X absorbed repeated shocks. Some graduated into recessions, others built momentum only to watch markets collapse again. Stability felt temporary, even when things were going well. That's why many Gen Xers quietly diversify their lives. Multiple skills, side incomes, and backup plans aren't about ambition, they're about preparedness. Psychologically, repeated instability trains the brain to expect disruption. Planning becomes a form of emotional regulation. You don't assume the floor is solid, so you learn to balance carefully. One of the less discussed traits of Gen X is how capable they are under pressure. They often handle emergencies with surprising calm. This isn't bravery, it's familiarity. When you grow up managing yourself, crises feel like an extension of normal life. But that same strength can make vulnerability feel uncomfortable. Asking for support can register as failure rather than connection. Research has shown that Gen X is less likely to seek emotional help during stress, not because they lack relationships, but because their nervous systems learned early to self-contain. There's also their unique relationship with learning. Before instant access to information, knowledge required effort. Libraries, manuals, and trial and error shaped how they processed understanding. Because information was harder to obtain, it was valued differently. The brain encoded it more deeply. This is why many Gen Xers prefer hands-on learning and problem-solving. If something broke, you didn't outsource the fix immediately. You experimented, you failed, you tried again. That built confidence in figuring things out, even without guidance. Now, many Gen X parents watch their children grow up in a hyper-visible, highly supervised world. They provided the presence they lacked, but sometimes wonder about the trade-off. From their perspective, visibility equals vulnerability. Dependence feels risky. Independence feels safer, even if it's harder. This doesn't mean Gen X believes they had it better. It means they recognize how different the psychological environment was. They understand what it means to be alone with your thoughts, for better or worse. Here's a surprising insight. Gen X may be the last generation shaped by boredom as a teacher. Long stretches of unstructured time forced imagination, patience, and self-entertainment. Those mental skills don't announce themselves loudly, but they form the backbone of quiet resilience. They also explain why Gen X often seems comfortable being overlooked. They are a bridge generation, linking an analog world to a digital one. Bridges aren't flashy, they exist to hold weight and move others forward. Gen X rarely asks for recognition because they learned not to expect it. They show up, do the work, and move on. That mindset can look detached, but it's actually deeply functional. Understanding Gen X psychology isn't about nostalgia. It's about recognizing how environments shape emotional habits that last a lifetime. Their traits didn't appear randomly. They were learned, reinforced, and normalized. If you see yourself in this, or see someone you care about more clearly now, take a moment to reflect on how your environment shaped you too. Share what resonated, and stay curious about the invisible forces shaping human behavior.